Something big is happening, but you rarely see that on Western mainstream media. In the past few weeks, from the United States to Europe, people are taking to the streets to protest against the warmongers. On February the 19th, at the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C., hundreds of, if not thousands of people gathered together at this Rage Against the War Machine rally. These are some of the videos that went viral on social networks.
No NATO! No war! No NATO! No war! No NATO! No war!
We are here today in painful recognition that our government does not have the capacity to heal the divisions in this nation or the willingness to use the basic science of human relations, sincere diplomacy, to avoid violent conflict, and is, in fact, unwilling to end conflict peacefully.
On February the 23rd, No to NATO campaign took place in London.
This gathering in London on 25 February 2023 resolves to establish in the UK and Ireland a No to NATO campaigning organisation to carry the fight against imperialist wars to the widest possible audience.
And this anti-war movement is not just limited to London. Several European countries also see these anti-war movements.
Sortons vite de l'OTAN! Pour la paix en Ukraine!
Deutschland! Und das merken wir uns, liebe Leute. Das merken wir uns. Das merken wir uns.
The speakers, advocates, and attendees at these rallies include veterans, former politicians, journalists, hosts, and also rock musicians. And they want to send a clear message to the warmongers. Stop pushing the world to a World War III. Since the Western mainstream media is not showing the real voices here in my show, I'm going to show you the voices from these anti-war movements. Hello everybody, welcome to Talk It Out with me, Li Jingjing. This show always aims to show you the different voices and the stories that are often neglected by the Western mainstream media. I'm very honored today that I invited one of the key organizers of these anti-war movements. His name is Nick Brana. He is the lead organizer of the Rage Against the War Machine campaign in Washington, D.C. He's also the chair of the People's Party of the US. And he's also the former National Political Outreach Coordinator on Bernie Sanders' 2016 presidential campaign. So Nick Brana, welcome to the show.
Hi, Li Jingjing. It's great to be with you.
Tell us more about these events. How many people attended? And are there some highlight moments that you want to talk about?
Yeah, absolutely. So we got together in the late fall, early winter with the Libertarian Party. I'm the national chair of the People's Party. And we came together and said, you know, there hasn't been, we are in a world war right now. NATO and the United States has provoked a world war with Ukraine. They said, you know, they weren't going to send tanks. They're beginning to do that. They're moving towards that. They've deployed U.S. troops to the border of Ukraine. It's incredibly dangerous. And of course, the entire thing was provoked by NATO's expansion and the coup in Ukraine in 2014 of the democratically elected government in Ukraine. And so we said it's time for independent parties in the United States to show leadership. And we said we need to organize a large event. These kind of, you know, thank goodness there's lots of, you know, smaller anti-war events that have been happening, but they're not making a dent in the war machine's, you know, momentum towards what is increasingly moving towards a nuclear war between global superpowers, the United States and Russia, because of this insane war. And so we said, we have got to bring back the anti-war movement in this country, which has been largely dead since the Iraq war. So we started organizing. We said, we need to bring, we need to go big. We need to go much bigger than anything that's been done before. We need thousands of people at the Lincoln Memorial, this iconic location where Dr. Martin Luther King delivered speeches like I Have a Dream and Jobs for Justice, Jobs and Justice. And so we began organizing, and we got together, and the organizing really took off, of course, because the warmongers in the Democrat and the Republican Party in the United States, they just went full steam, have gone full steam ahead with the war, pumping more than $100 billion of U.S. taxpayer money into the war. And so we got an amazing group of speakers. 4 former members of Congress joined us to speak, including Tulsi Gabbard, Dennis Kucinich, Ron Paul, and Cynthia McKinney, 4 former presidential candidates as well. And so it was huge. We had Jimmy Dore join us, Max Blumenthal, the editor of The Gray Zone. So many people who are the biggest anti-war voices in the country came together, and we brought more than 3,000 people, 3,000 to 5,000 people, I'd say, together at the Lincoln Memorial, and it was the largest anti-war protest since the Iraq War. So we're very proud of having done that. It shows that there is a resistance in the United States against these endless wars, and against, in particular, this most dangerous war that they've started now, this war that is against another nuclear superpower, which has brought us closer to nuclear war than at any time since the Cuban Missile Crisis. So after we rallied there, we marched to the White House. Our march stretched several blocks across Washington, D.C., and we held another rally right there at the White House. And we have plans, of course, to continue organizing, to continue building this anti-war momentum, to dismantle the empire in the United States. And one of the things we're very proud about as well is we did it not by organizing kind of with one ideology or another. Rather, we said anyone who's opposed to the war is welcome. And we brought together people from left to right, the People's Party representing the left, the Libertarian Party representing the right, and we brought together people from across the political spectrum and showed that opposing war is not a left-right issue. Opposing empire is not a left-right issue. We called for the dissolution of NATO, the dissolution of the CIA. We called for an end to war and empire globally. We called for negotiations to end the war in Ukraine. And we called, most of all, for an end to the billions of dollars that our government is sending over and over again in weapons and arms and military aid to Ukraine that is keeping this war going.
It's very impressive. You mentioned there were thousands of people gathered at the Lincoln Memorial, biggest rally after Iraq War. What's driving all the people from the Western countries to participate in such a rally, to protest against the wars, to protest against the warmongers? What's driving them? It's very refreshing for me to see this.
Well, it is for us too, because there's an increasing recognition, despite the mainstream media propaganda in the United States, in the West, which simply paints this kind of cartoonish caricature of Russia and Putin as if it's this war is his fault single-handedly. He wants to reconstitute the Soviet Union. Russian troops are going to sweep across Western Europe and invade Germany and France and Spain, and I suppose they're going to conquer the United Kingdom too. It's ludicrous. This is what the neocons are peddling, though, and this is what the mainstream media is peddling. They say we have to stop Putin in Ukraine, otherwise he's gonna, they're gonna roll across Western Europe. It's crazy. Nobody believes that. Look at the map. When you look at the map over the last 30 years, ever since the end of the Cold War, when Germany was reunified, there was a promise by the United States not to expand NATO 1 inch to the east. Instead, you look over the last 30 years, NATO has doubled in size, added 14 countries, come right up to Russia's border, and is threatening to put essentially nuclear weapons right on the edge and missiles right on the edge of Russia's border. So that's a vital security threat to any country. No country would tolerate that. How do we know that? Because it happened. The Soviet Union placed missiles in Cuba, and the United States threatened to blow up the world over it unless you get those missiles out of Cuba. And so this is why we're trying to restore some sanity into the conversation and saying this is a war that is provoked by the hegemons in the United States who have this insane kind of vision that they can maintain American global hegemony, 70 years after the Second World War, when we've had other rising economic powers, including Russia, China, the other BRICS nations, many others, and yet that's their goal at any cost. So I think that's driving people. Also, the fact that Russia is the most sanctioned country in the history of the world, and yet all of those sanctions, which were meant to kind of, devastate Russia, punish them for defending themselves against NATO expansion, are just boomeranging right back onto the United States, the people of the US, the people of the West, because we're the ones who are dealing with exploding energy prices after the United States blew up the Nord Stream pipeline to Germany, cutting off their vital energy supply. And so energy prices have blown up in Europe. They've blown up in the US. The price of food has blown up in Europe and the US. So we're paying the cost of this war. And really, the Russian economy is doing fairly well. Meanwhile, we're the ones who are bearing the burden. So I think that's making more and more people realize that we need to stop this war. The other thing is that you have some incredible historical parallels that are happening. For example, Germany sending tanks to Russia. And so for Germany to send tanks to fight Russia, the German politician, Sarah Wagenknecht, totally going to mispronounce her last name, but she organized a rally of 50,000 people this past Saturday at Brandenburger Tor in Berlin, where the wall historically divided East and West. 50,000 people came out to protest the war, to protest the deployment of German tanks and weapons to Ukraine to fight Russia. And so there is a growing peace movement, as you referenced, across Europe and in the United States. Thousands of people marched through the streets of London this past weekend. There was, of course, last weekend, Rage Against the War Machine in the US. Thousands of people marching from the Lincoln Memorial to the White House. This past weekend also, in addition to London and all the people who gathered in Germany, the 50,000 people there, there were thousands who gathered in Paris, thousands who gathered in Milan, across Italy, France, Germany. And so this is, of course, on the first year anniversary of the kind of escalation of the war, and the 9th anniversary of the war, which really began in 2014 with the U.S. coup in Ukraine. So that's what's bringing more people out at this point.
Mm-hmm. And, if a Chinese person like me or Chinese diplomats criticize NATO's role, and they will say, well, see, Chinese are attacking and undermining the Western alliance. So they take it very seriously. But I think based on what's happening in these campaigns across the world, it seems like many more citizens from the Western countries, the people in Western countries are also against this NATO, the Western alliance. Do you think so?
Oh, yeah, without question. NATO shouldn't exist anymore. It should have been dissolved with the Warsaw Pact in 1991. And people are against it because people in the United States and people in Europe, but especially in the U.S., there are millions and millions of people, hundreds, who lack health care in this country. They lack adequate housing. They lack food, even food insecure. They don't have access to education. They don't have good jobs. Wages haven't been raised in this country, in the United States, since 2007, and now inflation has gutted the value of wages and people's savings in the United States. So we need those resources right here at home. We can't be sending all that money to kill people to kill hundreds of thousands of people in Ukraine and Russia. You know, we need that money here. And that's what a lot of people came to protest. There was just a massive disaster and train derailment in East Palestine in the United States that has poisoned the water, poisoned the air. And this, of course, is the result of the fact that the United States doesn't invest in infrastructure. It doesn't invest in its own people. It's constantly cutting social programs. And then it's putting all of its money into this metastasizing military-industrial complex that's completely out of control. The military-industrial complex in the United States, it now consumes half of the discretionary budget that goes into the federal budget. So the U.S. spends more than the next 9 biggest militaries in the world combined, $858 billion a year. That's enough to end homelessness in the U.S. It's enough to provide free cancer treatment for years to everybody in the United States. Those are the kinds of things that actually benefit human needs that we need to be spending it on. The Pentagon has also been audited 5 times, and it's failed every single audit. It can only account for 39% of its assets. The Pentagon. That wouldn't be acceptable in any other business or any kind of environment. And so we shouldn't put up with it either. We need to, one of our demands as Rage Against the War Machine was to slash the military budget, cut it in half, and it's still going to be bigger than every other country.
Let's talk about China, because you know what, in the past few weeks, we saw all the Western mainstream media, US mainstream media, hype over the threat of a Chinese balloon. And they even sent missiles to shoot it down. But the thing is, I think the timing is just really interesting, because the day they announced the threat of the balloon, it's just the same day that the train derailment happened in Ohio on February the 3rd. Now, of course, we don't see the same scale of coverage on the Ohio train derailment, and nothing on Nord Stream 2 pipeline blast. So I'm wondering, how do you see this hype over the threat from China?
The United States, in its imperial hegemonic quest to maintain global military and economic supremacy, is instigating wars with 2 nuclear superpowers, Russia and Ukraine, and China. And the episode with the balloon was so ludicrous. I mean, essentially, like you said, it was used to essentially cover up the train derailment in East Palestine in the U.S. It was used to cover up Seymour Hersh's revelation that the Nord Stream pipeline was bombed by the United States, cutting off all of Europe from critical energy. And the kind of reaction in the media and from the Democrats and the Republicans was laughable. For a week, they followed this balloon's trajectory across the U.S. and then finally shot it down, you know, with jets and missiles, and then shot down other objects apparently as well in the north. All of this, we have to realize and call it out for what it is we're being prepared for wider war in the U.S. The people in the United States, there's a culture of fear of China and Russia that is being deliberately concocted in order to brace us for a wider war. And the way that this always happens in U.S. history is that the people of the U.S., and I would say the people of every country, they kind of intuitively don't want war. They're against war. Nobody wants to commit their resources to that. Nobody wants to send their young people to die in those wars. Nobody wants the freedoms that are taken from us in the U.S. because of those wars. And so as a result of that, the people always have to be tricked into war with false flags. It goes back to the Spanish-American War, the First World War, the Second World War, Vietnam, the Gulf of Tonkin. There's always some kind of false flag event that the media jumps on and hypes just kind of 24/7, like they did with the balloon, in order to provoke and kind of aggravate people into going to war. So that's something that we have to be extremely careful and watchful for right now, is that the U.S. Seems to be trying to brace people and preparing people for some kind of event that is going to allow it to widen the war in Ukraine, is going to allow it to deploy troops, as David Petraeus and others have said, that the United States wants to even send jets and troops into Ukraine, or kind of escalate and inflame the conflict with China in Taiwan.
And just from your observations, do people in the United States generally scared of the balloon from China? What's their thought? What's their opinion over this threat of a Chinese balloon?
Generally, I think people thought that the reaction was ridiculous. I think generally people thought, why is this receiving so much coverage as opposed to anything else? Why is there a week straight of coverage of this balloon? The balloon poses no kind of threat to the United States. I mean, China is a modern military which has satellites that can accomplish anything more, that this balloon would accomplish if it was spying. So it doesn't make any sense. But in the United States, this gets to the general opinion of the mainstream media. The mainstream media in the U.S. is extremely discredited because it never covers the things that are actually of interest to working people in the U.S. Like the train derailment in East Palestine. And so that's why actually in 2016, when Donald Trump ran, the media spent literally billions of dollars of free advertising, of airtime, attacking Trump, and it only boosted him. Because people are so sick of the establishment in this country, 71% of people want a major new party in this country, that that when the media attacks someone now, it just helps that person. It just builds that person because they're so distrustful of a media that has misled them and protected the elite and the rich and the powerful and the political class at their expense, that doesn't reflect the actual concerns of their own lives. They're so tired of these kind of, plastic millionaires who get paid, like Rachel Maddow, who get paid $30,000 an episode to come on air and to lie to people. And that's why people are tuning out. Only about 1 million people watch MSNBC and CNN nightly. The most popular news host in the U.S. is actually Tucker Carlson. Even among Democrats, he's the most popular news host with about 3 million nightly viewers. But this is a country of 330 million people. So even that is just 1% of the American people. So that's why people are increasingly tuning into the media, independent media of other countries, and they're getting different perspectives. And that's a good thing because we need to escape kind of the grips of this American kind of corporate media propaganda.
Thank you so much, Nick Brana. Thank you so much for joining in and sharing your perspective. You know what? You told us the struggles that average Americans, like working class, are suffering, the struggles they're suffering. And I just finished a live stream before interviewing you with guests from Africa and Latin America. We were discussing the Belt and Road Initiative. And I told them that, you know what? The Belt and Road Initiative is not just a project for the Global South. It actually welcomes the United States to join because it's important to build a land bridge throughout every continent. So if the United States can also have this win-win cooperation spirit and join the Belt and Road Initiative and bring better infrastructure to the United States, so average Americans will have much better life. So I think that's important. I hope that it will one day, maybe not soon, but one day we can enter this peaceful world, promote world peace, and also join hands to build infrastructure and to bring better life for everyone in every continent, regardless which country you're from.
If I could say, there are many people in the U.S. who would like that. There are many people who would like to abolish war, as we showed. We need solid, quality political leadership here in the U.S., and that's why the People's Party, the Libertarian Party, others are organizing independent parties and looking to break through. And we, as the People's Party, are really hoping that Jimmy Dore and encouraging Jimmy Dore to run for president. He unites left and right better than anyone else. We're calling on him to do that. And if we can get people like that who actually speak for the working class in power, then I think we will see a whole new era of collaboration with China and the BRICS nations and the whole rest of the world that we very much look forward to.
Very looking forward to that day. Thank you so much, Nick Brenna. Hope to have you back on my show very soon.
Thank you, Li Jingjing.